Big block V8 engines represent the peak of American automotive engineering, the ultimate expression of displacement, torque, and raw horsepower. These weren't economy engines or compromises. These were purpose-built powerhouses, designed to dominate drag strips, conquer NASCAR ovals, and make every stoplight a statement. Today, we're counting down the 12 most powerful big block V8 engines of all time. From legendary Hemi power to astronomical cubic inches, from factory underrated monsters to hand-built racing legends that changed automotive history forever. Number 12, the Ford 460. Ford's 460 cubic inch V8 represented the Blue Oval's ultimate expression of big block displacement, a massive power plant that prioritized low-end torque and durability over high-revving horsepower. Introduced in 1968, this 7.5-liter monster was designed to move Ford's largest cars and trucks with authority, but it quickly became something more in the hands of performance enthusiasts who recognized its untapped potential. The 460 cubic inch engine featured a massive bore and stroke combination that created enormous displacement and prodigious torque output. In its most potent early form, the 460 produced 365 horsepower and 485 pound-feet of torque, numbers that were impressive but didn't tell the complete story. This was an engine designed for low RPM torque delivery, building massive power below 3,000 RPM and creating the kind of effortless acceleration that made big luxury cars feel genuinely quick, despite their substantial weight. The architecture was classic Ford big block with cast iron construction throughout, creating an engine that was heavy but virtually indestructible. The crankshaft was forged steel. The connecting rods were heavy-duty pieces designed to handle serious cylinder pressure, and the block featured substantial main bearing webs that could withstand tremendous stress. The cylinder walls were thick and robust, designed to handle decades of thermal cycling without cracking or distortion. The main bearing caps were 4-bolt units in high-performance applications, providing additional stability under extreme loads and preventing crankshaft flex at high RPM. The oiling system was simple but effective, with a high-volume oil pump capable of maintaining adequate pressure even under sustained heavy throttle. The valve covers were massive cast aluminum pieces that added to the engine's distinctive appearance and provided excellent heat dissipation. The intake manifold in performance applications was typically a single-plane aluminum design that maximized high RPM airflow at the expense of low-speed torque. The exhaust manifolds were heavy cast iron units that were nearly indestructible but restrictive, making them prime candidates for replacement with headers in performance builds. The camshaft was a hydraulic flat tappet design in most applications, providing adequate performance with minimal maintenance requirements and quiet operation. The pistons were cast aluminum in standard form, though forged pistons were available for serious performance applications requiring higher compression ratios. The timing chain was a simple roller design that could last hundreds of thousands of miles, with proper oil changes and maintenance. The distributor was a conventional points-type ignition in early years, later transitioning to electronic ignition for improved reliability and easier tuning. The 460 found its home primarily in full-size Ford and Lincoln products, moving Continental Mark sedans and LTD wagons with surprising ease. But the engine's real legacy developed later, as hot rodders and drag racers discovered that the massive displacement and bulletproof construction made an ideal foundation for serious power builds. The engine's stroke was particularly impressive at 3.85 inches, one of the longest strokes in production American V8 history. This long stroke created the massive torque output that defined the 460's character. Combined with a 4.36-inch bore, the displacement math worked out to exactly 460 cubic inches of American V8 muscle. Ford produced the 460 for nearly 3 decades, with the engine remaining in production through 1997 in truck applications. Today, early 460 engines are highly sought after by builders who recognize the potential locked inside, that massive displacement, and properly built examples can produce over 600 horsepower while maintaining streetability and reliability that modern engines struggle to match. Number 11, the Chevrolet 502 Big Block. General Motors Performance Parts created the 502 cubic inch Big Block as the ultimate evolution of Chevrolet's legendary Mark IV architecture, taking the displacement envelope to unprecedented levels. Introduced in the 1990s as a crate engine option, the 502 represented everything Chevrolet had learned about big block V8 design over 3 decades, packaged into a turnkey power plant that delivered between 450 and over 500 horsepower, depending on specification. The 502 was based fundamentally on the same architecture that powered Chevelles and Corvettes in the Golden Age, but with bore and stroke increased to their practical limits. The 4.47-inch bore and 4-inch stroke created 8.2 liters of displacement, making this one of the largest production-based V8 engines ever offered by an American manufacturer. Power output varied depending on the specific crate engine package selected, but even the most conservative versions produced over 450 horsepower and 550 pound-feet of torque. The high-output versions with better cylinder heads and more aggressive camshaft profiles could exceed 500 horsepower while maintaining streetability and reliability. The 502 featured modern manufacturing techniques and materials unavailable during the original muscle car era. The casting quality was superior to vintage blocks, the machining tolerances were tighter, and the internal components were designed using computer analysis and modern metallurgy. The cylinder heads featured large ports and valves designed to flow enormous amounts of air and fuel. The intake manifold was a single-plane design, optimized for maximum power output rather than low-speed drivability. Everything about the 502 was designed for maximum performance, with streetability maintained through careful calibration rather than fundamental compromise. The valve springs were high-performance pieces capable of controlling valve motion at sustained high RPM without float or failure. The rocker arms were stamped steel in base applications, but could be upgraded to roller rockers for reduced friction and improved valve train stability. The combustion chambers were carefully designed with optimal quench areas that promoted efficient combustion and reduced detonation tendency. The compression ratio was typically between 9.5 and 10.2 to 1, high enough for serious power but compatible with premium pump gasoline. The pistons featured deep valve reliefs to accommodate the aggressive camshaft profiles without valve-to-piston contact. The connecting rods were forged steel pieces that were stronger and lighter than the cast rods used in earlier production big blocks. The crankshaft was fully counterweighted and balanced as an assembly, ensuring smooth operation even at sustained high engine speeds. The oil pan was a deep sump design that increased oil capacity and improved oil control during hard acceleration and cornering. The water pump was a high-flow unit designed to maintain optimal cooling even under sustained full-throttle operation in hot weather. The harmonic balancer was a substantial piece designed to control crankshaft vibrations and protect the front main seal from damage. General Motors offered the 502 in various states of tune, from relatively mild street engines to full competition pieces, capable of powering pro-street cars and drag racing machines. Today, the 502 represents the ultimate expression of Chevrolet big block philosophy, proving that classic architecture could still compete in the modern era when engineered properly and built without compromise. Number 10, the AMC 401. American Motors Corporation's 401 cubic inch V8 represented the company's largest and most powerful engine, a massive power plant that proved AMC could build serious performance despite limited resources. Introduced in 1971, the 401 was AMC's answer to the big blocks from General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler, providing the power necessary to compete in the muscle car wars even as those wars were winding down. The 401 featured a 6.6-liter displacement, achieved through a 4.165-inch bore and 3.68-inch stroke. In its most potent factory form, the engine produced 330 horsepower and 430 pound-feet of torque, numbers that were respectable, if not class-leading. The architecture was distinctly AMC, sharing little with engines from the Big Three. The block featured unusual design elements, including a unique main bearing arrangement and distinctive external appearance that made AMC engines immediately identifiable. AMC engineers prioritized durability and reliability over ultimate power output, creating an engine that could withstand serious abuse while requiring minimal maintenance. The 401 found its home primarily in the AMX and Javelin, AMC's performance-oriented pony cars that competed directly with Camaros, Mustangs, and Firebirds. In these applications, the big block provided impressive straight-line performance. Despite the car's relatively modest curb weight, quarter-mile times in the mid-14-second range were possible with proper gearing and driver skill. 0 to 60 acceleration took approximately 6.5 seconds, making the 401-powered AMC products genuinely quick by early 70s standards. The engine's weight distribution was surprisingly good in the AMX and Javelin, with AMC engineers managing to keep the nose from being too heavy, despite the big block's substantial mass. The suspension was upgraded in 401 applications, with stiffer springs, larger sway bars, and heavier-duty shock absorbers to handle the increased power. The exhaust system featured dual pipes with minimal restriction, allowing the 401 to breathe freely and produce a deep, authoritative rumble. The carburetor was typically a 4-barrel motorcraft unit calibrated specifically for the 401's flow characteristics and power band. The ignition system was conventional points type in early years, requiring regular maintenance, but providing reliable spark under all conditions. The cooling system was upgraded with a larger radiator and higher capacity water pump to handle the additional heat generated by the big block under hard use. The transmission options included a close ratio 4-speed manual or a 3-speed automatic, with the manual being preferred by performance enthusiasts. The rear axle ratios were available in multiple configurations, with numerically higher gears providing better acceleration at the expense of highway fuel economy. The brakes were upgraded to larger front discs in most 401 applications, providing adequate stopping power for the increased performance. The engine's torque output was its greatest strength, with massive low-end grunt that made AMC products feel stronger than their horsepower numbers suggested. The long stroke created excellent cylinder filling and strong combustion pressure, translating into tire spinning acceleration from low RPM. AMC continued producing the 401 through the mid-70s, gradually detuning it for emissions compliance as regulations tightened. The engine gained a cult following among AMC enthusiasts who appreciated its unique character and genuine performance potential. Today, 401 engines are relatively rare, but surviving examples are prized by AMC faithful, who recognize the engine's place in muscle car history. Number 9, the Dodge 446-pack. Chrysler's 440 cubic inch V8 with 6-pack carburation represented one of the most successful compromises between big block displacement and street performance. While the Hemi grabbed headlines and dominated drag strips, the 446-pack provided nearly comparable performance with better drivability and significantly lower cost, making it the weapon of choice for street racers who needed to drive their cars daily. The 440 featured a 7.2-liter displacement achieved through a 4.32-inch bore and 3.75-inch stroke in 6-pack configuration with 3 Holley 2-barrel carburetors, feeding air and fuel through a special intake manifold. The 440 produced 390 horsepower and 490 pound-feet of torque, numbers that translated into genuinely ferocious acceleration. The 6-pack carburation system was the engine's defining feature and its greatest advantage over single 4-barrel configurations. The center carburetor handled idle and light throttle operation, providing smooth drivability and reasonable fuel economy for a big block. The outboard carburetors remained closed until the throttle reached approximately half travel, then opened progressively to feed the engine's appetite at full power. The intake manifold was a work of art, with carefully designed runners that balanced airflow between all 8 cylinders while accommodating the 3-carburetor arrangement. The air cleaner assembly was equally distinctive, with 3 separate elements covering each carburetor and creating an aggressive, purposeful look that left no doubt about the engine's performance intentions. Performance in period testing was impressive, with 446 pack-equipped cars, like the Plymouth Roadrunner and Dodge Super Bee, running low 14 second-quarter miles bone stock. With minor tuning and optimal conditions, high 13-second times were achievable, making these among the quickest production muscle cars of their era. The 446-pack became legendary on the street, where its combination of drivability and performance made it nearly unbeatable in stoplight-to-stoplight racing. Today, original 6-pack cars command significant premiums over single-carburetor 440 models. The engine represents perhaps the perfect balance between ultimate power and real-world usability. Number 8, the Oldsmobile 455 W30. Oldsmobile's 455 cubic inch V8 in W30. Specification represented one of the most underrated and underappreciated big blocks of the muscle car era. While Chevrolet, Ford, and Chrysler grabbed headlines with their monster motors, Oldsmobile quietly built an engine that could hang with the best of them, wrapping massive displacement and serious power in a package that flew under the radar of insurance companies and law enforcement alike. The 455 featured 7.5 liters of displacement through a 4.126-inch bore and 4.25-inch stroke, one of the longest strokes in big block history. This massive stroke created prodigious torque output, with the W30 version producing 370 horsepower and 500 pound-feet of torque. The W30 package transformed the already potent 455 into a genuine performance engine through a combination of improved breathing, aggressive camshaft profiles, and enhanced induction. The cylinder heads featured larger ports and valves than standard 455 applications. The intake manifold was a special aluminum casting designed to maximize airflow. The 455 W30 found its home primarily in the Oldsmobile 442, particularly in W30 specification cars that represented Oldsmobile's ultimate factory performance package. These cars could run mid to low 14-second quarter miles with proper gearing and driver skill, making them competitive with anything from the big three. The engine's character was distinctly different from the high-revving small blocks that many enthusiasts preferred. The 455 built power from idle, creating a wave of torque that felt like being pushed by a giant hand. Maximum power arrived relatively low in the rev range, with the engine happiest between 3,000 and 5,000 RPM. Oldsmobile's reputation for conservative engineering meant the 455 was built to withstand serious abuse while requiring minimal maintenance. Everything about the engine communicated that Oldsmobile prioritized reliability and longevity, creating a power plant that could deliver consistent performance for hundreds of thousands of miles. The W30 package became increasingly rare as Oldsmobile production declined and emissions regulations tightened. Today, original W30 cars are highly sought after by collectors who appreciate their combination of understated appearance and genuine performance capability. Number 7. The Pontiac 455 HO. Pontiac's 455 cubic inch V8 in high output specification represented the division's ultimate expression of big block power, the final evolution of the legendary Pontiac 5.8 architecture before emissions regulations effectively killed true high-performance engines. Introduced for 1971, the 455 HO produced 335 horsepower and 480 pound-feet of torque, numbers that seemed modest but translated into impressive real-world performance. The 455 featured Pontiac's classic V8 architecture taken to maximum displacement through a 4.152-inch bore and 4.21-inch stroke. The 7.5-liter displacement created enormous low-end torque that made Pontiac products feel substantially quicker than their horsepower ratings suggested. The 1971 model year was significant because it marked the industry's switch from gross to net horsepower ratings, making direct comparisons with earlier engines difficult. The 335 horsepower figure was a net rating, measured with all accessories and exhaust systems installed, making it more representative of actual installed performance than the gross ratings used in previous years. The 455 HO found its home primarily in the Trans Am and Formula Firebird, where it provided tire shredding acceleration despite the car's relatively heavy curb weight. Quarter-mile performance in the low 14-second range was achievable, making these among the quickest cars of 1971. The engine's character was typical Pontiac, with strong low-end torque and a power delivery that felt effortless and unstrained. Maximum power arrived relatively low in the rev range, with the engine happiest below 5,000 RPM, where it generated sustained, ground-pounding thrust. Pontiac continued offering the 455 in various forms through the mid-70s, but emissions regulations and corporate pressures gradually strangled its performance. The HO version was short-lived, available only in 1971 before being discontinued. Today, 1971, Trans Ams and Formulas with the 455 HO are among the most collectible Pontiacs, representing the division's last gasp of genuine high performance. Number 6, the Buick Stage 455. Buick's 455 cubic inch V8 in Stage 1 specification represented one of the most torque-rich engines ever installed in a production American car. A massive power plant that prioritized low-end grunt over peak horsepower and created one of the most brutal acceleration experiences available from any manufacturer. Introduced for 1970, the Stage 1 455 produced 360 horsepower, but that figure told only part of the story. The real magic was in the torque output, 510 pound-feet at just 2,800 RPM. That torque figure was extraordinary by any standard, matching or exceeding the output of engines with significantly more displacement and higher horsepower ratings. The Stage 1 package included numerous enhancements over the standard 455, including improved cylinder heads with better port shapes, a more aggressive camshaft profile, a high-flow intake manifold, and a specially calibrated carburetor. The 455's architecture featured a 4.312-inch bore and 3.9-inch stroke, creating 7.5 liters of displacement. The block was typical Buick, with robust casting and substantial material in critical areas. Buick's conservative engineering approach meant the Stage 1 could deliver consistent performance for hundreds of thousands of miles with proper maintenance. The Stage 1 455 found its ultimate expression in the GSX, Buick's limited production muscle car, that combined the powerful engine with aggressive styling and upgraded suspension. In this application, the massive torque output created acceleration that felt violent and unrelenting, with the car surging forward from any speed in any gear. Quarter-mile times in the high 13-second range were achievable with optimal conditions. The power delivery was the Stage 1's most distinctive characteristic. Rather than building gradually to a peak, the engine produced massive thrust from just above idle, creating instant throttle response and dramatic acceleration even at low RPM. This made the Stage 1 particularly effective in street racing situations, where lights-to-lights performance mattered more than sustained high-speed runs. The Stage 1's reputation grew through the 70s and 80s, as survivors became increasingly rare and valuable. Today, GSX models with the Stage 1 engine are among the most collectible Buicks, commanding significant premiums and recognized as representing Buick's finest performance moment. Number 5. The Chevrolet ZL 1427. The Chevrolet ZL 1427 cubic inch V8 represented one of the most extreme factory engines ever offered. A hand-built aluminum block monster created specifically for racing that somehow made its way into a handful of production Camaros through Chevrolet's Central Office Production Order program. With an official rating of 430 horsepower that was laughably conservative, actual output was closer to 500 horsepower or more. The ZL1's defining feature was its aluminum construction. The block was cast from aluminum rather than iron, reducing weight by over 100 pounds compared to an iron block 427. This weight savings improved weight distribution, reduced overall curb weight, and allowed for more aggressive suspension tuning. The cylinder heads were equally impressive, featuring large rectangular ports that flowed massive amounts of air and fuel. The valves were oversized. The valve springs were high-performance pieces capable of controlling the valves at extreme RPM, and the entire valve train was assembled with racing-level precision. The camshaft was ground with aggressive profiles featuring substantial duration and lift, creating significant valve overlap, and a lumpy idle that announced the engine's racing intentions. The ZL1 found its way into just 69 Camaros through the COPO program, making these among the rarest and most valuable muscle cars ever built. The cars were sold primarily to drag racers who needed the ultimate factory package for NHRA competition, where the aluminum block's weight advantage provided a significant competitive edge. Performance was genuinely shocking, with properly set up ZL1 Camaros capable of low 12-second quarter miles completely stock. With minimal modifications like headers and drag slicks, high 11-second times were achievable, making these among the quickest production-based cars of their era. The ZL1's cost was astronomical by 1969 standards, adding over $4,000 to the base price of a Camaro. This made ZL1 cars more expensive than Corvettes and priced them out of reach for most buyers. Today, surviving ZL1 Camaros are worth millions of dollars, recognized as representing the absolute peak of Chevrolet's muscle car development. Number 4. The Chevrolet 427L88. The Chevrolet L88 427 cubic inch V8 represented Corvette's ultimate big block, a barely disguised racing engine that Chevrolet offered to the public, with minimal restrictions and maximum performance. Officially rated at 430 horsepower, the actual output was significantly higher, with most experts agreeing the real figure was closer to 560 horsepower or more. The L88 was engineered specifically for racing, with every component selected and calibrated for maximum power output, rather than streetability or drivability. The crankshaft was fully counterweighted, forged steel. The connecting rods were shot, peened, and magnafluxed, and the pistons were forged aluminum pieces, capable of withstanding extreme cylinder pressures. The compression ratio was an astronomical 12.5 to 1, requiring racing fuel. The cylinder heads were the L88's greatest strength, featuring enormous rectangular intake ports that flowed massive amounts of air. The combustion chambers were designed for maximum efficiency and minimal heat loss, with carefully shaped surfaces that promoted complete combustion. The L88 was available in Corvettes from 1967 through 1969, with just 116 examples built across all 3 model years. Chevrolet made the L88 deliberately difficult to order, requiring deletion of most comfort and convenience features, including the radio and heater. Performance and racing trim was devastating, with L88 Corvettes dominating SCCA and IMSA competition throughout the late 60s. At tracks like Sebring and Daytona, L88-powered Corvettes could run with purpose-built race cars costing far more money. On the street, L88 Corvettes were virtually undrivable in normal conditions. The engine required constant high RPM operation to stay cool. The fuel consumption was measured in gallons per mile, and the high compression ratio made starting difficult. But on a racetrack or drag strip, the L88 was utterly dominant. Today, L88 Corvettes are among the most valuable muscle cars ever built, with pristine examples commanding prices well into 7 figures. Number 3, the Ford Boss 429. The Ford Boss 429 cubic inch V8 was never supposed to be a production engine. Designed specifically for NASCAR competition, this 7-liter monster was built to dominate high-speed ovals, where aerodynamics and sustained high RPM power delivery determined success. But NASCAR's homologation rules required Ford to build and sell a minimum number of production vehicles with the engine installed, leading to one of the most exclusive and exotic muscle cars ever created, the Boss 429 Mustang. The 429 featured unique architecture unlike any other Ford engine, with hemispherical combustion chambers similar in concept to Chrysler's legendary Hemi, but executed with distinctly Ford engineering. The block was massive and heavy, requiring extensive modifications to the Mustang's engine bay to accommodate its unusual dimensions. Ford officially rated the Boss 429 at 375 horsepower, a figure that was laughably conservative and fooled absolutely nobody. Actual output was estimated to be closer to 500 horsepower, with some experts suggesting the real number was even higher. Each Boss 429 engine was hand-built by skilled technicians at Ford's Car Craft facility in Brighton, Michigan. The assembly process took significantly longer than normal production engines, with each component carefully measured, fitted, and balanced. Just 859 Boss 429 Mustangs were built across 1969 and 1970, making these among the rarest production muscle cars. The cars were sold primarily to drag racers and serious enthusiasts who understood the engine's racing pedigree. But on a drag strip or racetrack, the Boss 429 came alive, building power from mid-range and pulling hard to redline with authority that few engines could match. Quarter-mile times in the mid-13-second range were achievable completely stock, and with minor modifications, high 12-second performance was possible. Today, Boss 429 Mustangs are worth 7 figures, recognized as representing Ford's ultimate muscle car achievement. Number 2, the Chrysler 426 Hemi. The Chrysler 426 cubic inch Hemi needs no introduction to anyone who knows American muscle car history. This 7-liter monster with hemispherical combustion chambers dominated drag racing, conquered NASCAR, and created a legend that endures 6 decades after its introduction. Officially rated at 425 horsepower and 490 pound-feet of torque, the actual output was significantly higher, with most experts agreeing the real numbers were closer to 500 horsepower or more. The Hemi's defining feature was its hemispherical combustion chamber design, which placed the valves on opposite sides of the chamber, rather than side by side as in conventional wedge heads. This arrangement allowed for larger valves, straighter intake and exhaust ports, and more efficient combustion, translating into significantly more power than wedge head engines with similar displacement. The Hemi block was cast iron with substantial thickness in critical areas, designed to withstand the enormous cylinder pressures generated by high compression ratios and aggressive valve timing. Every component was built to racing specifications, even in street applications, ensuring durability under conditions that would destroy lesser engines. The Hemi's power delivery was legendary, building thrust from low RPM and never stopping until redline. The acceleration was violent and unrelenting, with the engine overwhelming rear tires and creating dramatic launches from standing starts. Quarter-mile times in the low 13-second range were achievable completely stock. Chrysler offered the Hemi in various models from 1966 through 1971, including the Charger, Roadrunner, Super Bee, Challenger, and Cuda. The Hemi added substantial money to any vehicle's price, making these cars expensive when new. This limited production ensured the Hemi remained exclusive and exotic. The Hemi's reputation on the drag strip was unmatched. In NHRA competition, Hemi-powered cars dominated superstock and modified classes, setting records that stood for years. The combination of robust architecture, efficient breathing, and massive displacement created an engine that could be built to produce enormous power, while maintaining the reliability necessary for sustained racing use. The Hemi's legacy extends far beyond its original production run. The engine became a cultural icon, representing the absolute peak of American muscle car performance. Today, original Hemi cars command premium prices, with some examples worth millions of dollars. Number 1. The Chevrolet 454 LS6. Taking the top spot on our countdown is the Chevrolet 454 cubic inch LS6, and that placement reflects this engine's status as the absolute peak of GM's big block development. Introduced for 1970 in the Chevelle SS 454, the LS6 represented everything Chevrolet had learned about building powerful, reliable V8 engines over 2 decades, packaged into a turnkey production power plant that delivered 450 horsepower and 500 pound-feet of torque. The LS6 was based on Chevrolet's Mark IV big block architecture, featuring a 7.4-liter displacement, achieved through a 4.25-inch bore and 4-inch stroke. The block was specifically designed to handle high-performance applications, with additional material in critical areas and improved oiling systems. The cylinder heads were the LS6's greatest strength, featuring large rectangular intake ports that flowed massive amounts of air and fuel. The combustion chambers were carefully shaped for maximum efficiency, with valve angles and surface contours designed to promote complete combustion. The LS6 featured an aggressive hydraulic camshaft with substantial duration and lift, creating significant valve overlap and a lumpy idle that announced the engine's performance intentions. The carburetor was an enormous Holley unit, mounted to an aluminum intake manifold designed for maximum flow. Performance in period testing was shocking, with LS6 Chevelles running consistent low 13-second quarter miles completely stock. Motor Trend magazine recorded a 13.1-second quarter mile at 107 miles per hour, making the LS6 Chevelle one of the quickest production cars ever tested. The LS6 was available only in 1970, with production ending before 1971 due to emissions regulations and insurance pressure. Just over 4,000 LS6 engines were built, making these among the rarer big block Chevrolet power plants. The LS6's legend grew through the 70s and 80s, as survivors became increasingly rare and valuable. Today, LS6 Chevelles are among the most collectible muscle cars, with pristine examples commanding prices well into 6 figures. The LS6 was more than just the most powerful big block of its era. It was a statement about American automotive engineering at its finest, a demonstration that Detroit could build engines to match anything from anywhere in the world. These 12 big block V8 engines represent the absolute peak of American automotive engineering, the ultimate expression of displacement, torque, and raw horsepower. From Ford's massive 460 to Chevrolet's legendary LS6, these power plants defined an era and created legends that endured decades later. They proved that American engineers could build engines to rival anything from Europe, and their dominance in racing cemented Detroit's reputation as the performance capital of the world. Which of these legendary big blocks would you want under your hood? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if you love stories from the golden age of horsepower, hit that subscribe button. Until next time, remember that these engines weren't just power plants. They were rolling thunder, mechanical poetry, and the sound of American freedom.